Hi, this is Peter Sko for Music is a Journey, and I'm back with part 3 in Ningen Isu's album by album video. Now, I've actually been home most of the last week or so because my school is mostly closed because of the coronavirus, COVID-19. My kids are also home from school, and although I thought being home would give me lots of time to get ahead on things, I actually find I spend a lot of time in the kitchen and doing grocery shopping and cooking and so on, so I am not making progress as fast as I had actually hoped I would be. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. The only thing is that because I'm not at work, I don't have access to a printer, which means in this video here you will not see all these nice little signs that I've been putting up in the background of the last 2 videos. So I'm sorry I couldn't continue with that theme. But let's get on with it now. So the band kicked off 2009 with their 20th anniversary since their debut album and released a double disc best of album covering 13 of 14 albums plus 3 re-recorded tracks and a new track as well. However, that's not what we're really going to focus on here. We're going by the studio album that was released later on in the year 2009, Mirai Romanha. Now, the previous album, Mannatsu no Yoru no Yume, Midsummer Night's Dream, was more of a fantasy and a surrealistic theme-based album. And this time here they decided to make the concept, considering their pursuit of rock and roll as a kind of romantic dream, Wajima wanted to use the word roman, meaning romantic, as in kind of romantic fantasy rather than amore. And so he wanted to use that in the theme somehow, and he considered the movement of romanticism, what's called romanha here, in the past. And he thought rock and roll, the pursuit of rock music, is a little bit like that. Rock is kind of like a romanticism as well. So he wanted to put that in there, and then he also put in Mirai, meaning future. So the album title actually means like future or futuristic romanticism, or the romance movement. The one thing Wajima kind of jokes then is maybe people would expect that the number of love songs would increase. Hard to imagine from Ningen Isu though, eh? On a personal note, Wajima explains that he'd been working a day job for the past many years, as had been the other 2 members. And he would work his day job there for several hours, then he would go home, and then he would meet up with Suzuki and Nakajima, and they would work on new songs, rehearse, and afterwards there would probably be some drinking, and he'd get home really late, totally knackered, and then get up the next day and repeat the same thing. And he thought, well, he began to question, why is it that human beings endure such grueling cycles in their day-to-day living with all this? And he thought about it, and he wondered if maybe this wasn't a good time to just quit his day job. Because he always had to take extended leave from work when they were doing recording or when they were going on tour. So he thought, if I just quit my job, and then I can just devote my time 100% to writing songs and 100% to the band. And so that's what he did, just went up and quit his job. And then he also did a lot of reading, and there was one book about Beethoven which he found particularly inspiring, but he also read a couple of books by Nietzsche, and yeah, they really inspired his thinking. In fact, 2 of the tracks on this album, Shingen, The Abyss, and Taiyo no Botsuraku, Downfall of the Sun, they were both inspired by the writings of Nietzsche. In fact, Wajima's lyrics pretty much dominate the album. Suzuki actually wrote the lyrics to just the one song, Meido Kissa, Hades Cafe, but it's a killer track, isn't it? And to be fair, Suzuki actually also wrote the music to quite a few of the songs on the album, so even though he didn't write the lyrics to everything, he does put together some killer music for some of the heaviest and hottest tracks. But anyway, Suzuki said that at the time there he wasn't really feeling very well. I mean, he didn't feel really confident in his writing. But Wajima does point out that Suzuki's writing, Suzuki songs, are essential to the balance of an Ningen Isu album. And we heard him say so before too, a few albums back. So, and you know what? Also, I gotta say, recently I've been finding, as I've been around Twitter more often than I've ever been, there are a lot of Suzuki fans out there. So Kenichi Suzuki, don't you worry, man. You got fans. Alright, on with the story about the album. The song Yama-san was written by Shinji Wajima, but it was about someone who worked with Nakajima at his construction job. Nakajima and Wajima would often go drinking and talk about things, and Nakajima would tell him about this guy, Yama-san, at his work. And Yama-san was such a unique character. Apparently, he seemed, in spite of the fact that he was at a construction site, or construction work, he was really a pure character, and it was said even that he had like a precious stone for a heart. And Wajima was so interested in the stories about this guy, so he wrote a song about him. And Yama-san has since passed away, but Nakajima says he's really glad to know that a song was written about this guy because he was such a pure and interesting man. Now there's a funny anecdote about the song Akato Kuro, Red and Black. It seemed that Nakajima was going to sing the lead vocals, but he said the key was at the upper limits of his register. And while rehearsing to sing the song, practicing, he actually lost his voice from trying to hit those high notes. So a friend of his told him that one good way to get your voice back was to drink the oil of sea chicken, canned tuna. So he went and he tried. He drank some sea chicken oil and found his voice was working fine. So whenever he had to practice the song, he always drank some sea chicken oil. However, before going off to the recording, he ran out. And so he made a quick trip to the store, bought a small bottle of vegetable oil, thought he'd try that, and went into the studio and sang. Got the notes, sang the song just fine. Short time after that, Suzuki shows up to the studio and says, "And it reeks of fish oil in here." And for some time after that, he would say, like, to other people, "Don't go anywhere near Nakajima, the guy stinks of oil." The band's routine was to go from rehearsal studio and to recording studio, and they started work on their next album in February of 2011. And it was on that one day that they were on their way to the studio that the great East Japan earthquake struck. And afterwards, they had to really consider about the situation of things. And Wajima was thinking, what can we do? What should we do? Should we treat the whole situation as somebody else's problem? Or should we engage in some activity at this point? But he thought the best thing that anybody could really do at this time here was just to hunker down and do their job as well as possible. And as a band, he thought the thing that we could do then is just try to make a really good album. So that's what they set out to do. Now, Wajima was thinking about the album's titles, and there is the word higang. Higang means like the equinox, but it can also mean the other side, according to Weblio. And Wajima explains that higang can also mean nirvana. It has that meaning. So while higang means nirvana, shigang means this world here. And so he decided to use that in the title as a kind of polar opposite to higang. Then he also put in Raisan, which has the meaning of warship. So basically the album's title, Shigen Raisan, is the meaning to worship this world, or the worship of this world. Now, as a bit of a side note, he says that 2012 was supposed to be the year of the Ascension, which many people conjectured to coincide with the end of the Mayan calendar in December of 2012. Now, the Ascension, as he explains in the book, is when basically our world ascends to a higher dimension or a higher dimensional existence. And he says, we can't really say, I mean, nothing happened, right, at the end of 2012, nothing happened, but we can't really say for sure if such a thing could happen, because we don't really understand fully the mechanism or the construct of the universe. So something like that could happen, but it's kind of easy to misunderstand. And he said basically it's not whether so much he thinks it will happen, but just that concept is very interesting to him. And so for the album cover, he requested that the artist create an image that captured both something from our world and something from perhaps a world in a higher realm or the next dimension up, so that the cover image is supposed to picture our world in a new realm or dimensional universe. Suzuki observes that the song Ahodarakyo, meaning satirical sutra, appears in a song off the previous album, sorry, not the previous album, but in the song Dotarai. Now, the satirical sutra was actually something that was a kind of popular thing going on in the Meiji period. I did try to read about it, but everything was in Japanese and couldn't get it all, but maybe it's not totally important. The thing is that Suzuki says that Wajima uses a lot of these words from Buddhism, because of course Wajima studied Buddhism in university. But Suzuki also says that his role in the band, or his character he dresses up as, is like a Buddhist monk. So he should actually know these words, but Wajima always has to explain them to him. And at the time he remembers, but later on he forgets them again. Wajima then brings up the song Haru no Nioi wa Neha no Kaori, which is the smell of spring is the fragrance of Nirvana. And he says that when springtime comes, there is this, of course, this scent in the air, the kind of the fragrance of new life, the beginning of spring there. And he says, you know, we also get this feeling in the springtime, a kind of intoxication or euphoria. And he says that is very much a heavenly thing, as in something related to heaven. And anyway, so he saw that this song should be about a new beginning, a new start. And after the great earthquake disaster, perhaps this was a chance then for a new start in things. Another song they mention is Okimoto Symptom, Kiss with the Devil. This was actually recorded during a session where they recorded a cover song for a tribute album for the Blue Hearts. And after recording that song there, Wajima was very impressed with what the studio did with their work. So they decided to record one more track, and that's Okimoto Symptom, which then is the sole, like, a track from a separate recording, which appears on this album here. I'm not even holding it up, by the way. Here we go, which appears on this album here. And he also says that that is the only song where he played a Rickenbacker guitar. Pretty cool. Yeah, I really like that song, actually. It's really cool. Anyway, so they did that. But he said, at the time of recording this album and writing the material for this album, he said things were actually really hard because he had moved into a very cheap apartment, which had really thin walls, and so he couldn't play the guitar while he was at home. So he had to go out to the parks or laundromats, and he went out to Higashi Koenji Shrine, and there was a park nearby, Sashinomori, where there was a kind of covered area. So he would go over there and sit, and he would play the guitar, and he brought this portable multi-track recorder with him, and he would write the riffs and play them and record them and arrange the music and everything. And he said it was really great because if there was a light rain, the shelter provided protection from the rain. In the winter, when it was still cold, he would just dress up for the cold weather, and in the summer he could bring an insect coil to chase away the mosquitoes. So he called it his Sanshinomori studio. And one of the songs he wrote there was, what is it? Ko-chan-ran. Yes. Ko-chan-ran, which is a moth orchid. And also Konjaku Hijiri, the monk in the past and the present, both those tracks were written while he was sitting in that park. So there you have it, Shigen Raisan. In 2013, Ningen Isu went ahead and recorded their 17th album, Mandoro. 17th album. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Prior to that, when they were still thinking about what they were going to do for the next album, they got an offer to play at Ozfest Japan 2013. And for a band that had spent the last 20-something years basically eking out a career, never scoring a chart-topping hit, never playing for a stadium-packed audience, this was going to be a great opportunity for them, hopefully, to reach out to new fans, get some new people interested in buying their albums, and as well sharing the stage with some of their biggest inspirations, such as Black Sabbath. So Wajima was figuring this new album, it was going to be like a second debut for the band. And so they thought to go back to their roots, and the title Mandoro, actually, it's an expression from, in the Tsugaru dialect in Aomori, Mandoro na Otsuki-sama, which basically means a full, round, bright moon. Now, there is also the Mandoro Festival, and I should explain that Mandoro, the kanji, actually means 10,000 lanterns. And the next two kanji, the lanterns part, actually means like a light, like a street light, or that kind of light, lantern, and basket. And they have this festival where they have this big kind of like fish-shaped thing with all these little baskets in with fire in or whatever, and that's what the festival's all about. So that's the Mandoro Festival. And there was also a concert venue in their home city of Hirosaki called Mandoro. So that term was very familiar, it was very close for them, it's of their local dialect, and they asked permission from the concert venue if they could use the name for the album. So that was really a big thing for them to kind of go back to their roots like that. He also said, Wajima also said that, you know, for people who are really popular, famous people, they're often called stars. And he said, now it may have been kind of impudent of the band, but he wanted to associate them also with stars because they had shared the stage with some of the biggest stars in rock music. So he had that idea as well, that he wanted to include that concept in there. Now the opening track, Shigen Goeka, this was actually written at the time of the previous album. So you have Shigen Raisan and Shigen Goeka, which basically means a hymn of this world. They actually, I think, as if I understood correctly, they played this as their opening song at Ozfest. And at the beginning, if you know the album, there's this little kind of dinging, like a clinging bell effect anyway. And so he thought it would be cool to keep that also at the beginning of the album. So you can hear that at the beginning of the album here for this song. The band really focused their effort on putting together this. And Suzuki actually mentions, like, they would play one riff and think, wow, that riff sounds really cool. And then they would record it and he would think, you know, it actually sounds kind of ordinary. And it was one of the things about recording was that the sound of the recording often sounds different from what you're actually hearing at the time you're playing it. But anyway, there was a humorous incident while they were recording one of the tracks here. Not recording, while they were rehearsing one of the tracks. I guess the lyrics hadn't been written yet and there was no title, but anyway, they were rehearsing the music. And then suddenly Suzuki said, wait, I think I can hear a cat. And everybody stopped and listened and said, no, I don't hear any cat. No, you're probably just hearing things. So they went on rehearsing again and Suzuki said, no, I hear a cat. And so they listened and then Wajima said, yeah, I can hear the faint sound of a cat's meow. So Nakajima, by his drum kit, stood up and looked up at the ceiling overhead and there was some pipe up there and he listened. You know, there's a cat meowing inside that pipe. So they had to hold off the rehearsal there and call someone in to rescue the cat from the pipe. And because of that incident, they decided to call the song Nekoja, Nekoja, which is like, it's a cat, or you're a cat. And from that, Wajima actually borrowed the lines from an old song from back in the Meiji times. There's an article on Wikipedia about it. Maybe I'll put like a screenshot here anyway. But yeah, he took the lyrics from that old ditty and yeah, named the song after that. So he thought that was such an interesting and amusing incident, so they had to have it kept on the album somehow. One song that Suzuki talks about, Nepta no Mondoriko, this was the one song where he wrote the lyrics as well as the music. He was thinking from the first album, they had the song Ayakashi no Tsutsumi, Ayakashi no Tsutsumi, and there's the kind of drum rhythm there, and that was actually inspired by what they call the Hayashi. You can see on the cover of their album, Ashirabayashi. It's that kind of accompaniment group where they have usually 3, 4, 5 people, someone's playing a small drum and so on. Anyway, there was this drum rhythm for that, and he wanted to do one for this Nepta character, which is, they have in Aomori the Nebuta Festival, but in Hirosaki they have the Nebuta Festival. Anyway, so he wanted to get this kind of drum rhythm to go for that song. And so Nakajima went with him to Aomori, and somebody from the Hayashi group showed him the rhythm. But Nakajima says it was difficult for him to catch the nuances in the drumming. And of course, in the end, he didn't play it on a handheld taiko, but he was playing it on a rock drum set. So anyway, the rhythm is inspired by that. And Suzuki explains about the Neputa art. There's various types of art, and some of it is like cranes or sunsets or beautiful women. But there's this one character, this Neputa fellow with the kind of buggy eyes and the flashing sword. You can see his illustration on the cover of their 20th album, Ijigen Kara no Hoko. I'll put a picture up here for you. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, he says that he really likes that character, and he says one of the things while he was writing that song, he just kept thinking about that character and the eyes, and he said like the severed heads and skulls, that kind of thing. Those kind of illustrations are the ones that he's most interested in, which sounds very much like we would expect from Suzuki, severed heads and stuff, yeah. So anyway, that was his big inspiration for writing that song. Now, there are a couple of notes here that are not mentioned in the book, but I happen to notice. One track on here is called Jigoku-hen, and another track is Kumo no Ito. Now, I mentioned something in the Part 1 series about some Japanese literature, a famous Japanese literature which was made into an animation series. 6 stories, each story lasting 2 parts, so 12 episodes in total. And these 2 stories are also featured in there. In fact, the one Jigoku-hen, I actually watched that one on YouTube. It is about a ruler, a very despotic ruler, who basically treats the common people as he wishes. Chop their heads off, knock them down, kill them, whatever. He has no thought for their well-being at all, only cares about his upper class, high class status. And he commissions a painter to paint the beauty of their country. He wants to see a giant mural showing just how beautiful their land is, and beautiful their country is. And the painter goes out and just witnesses how the common people are treated. And so he paints this big mural showing this hellish scene of torture and misery. And of course the tyrannical leader becomes very upset about this. I can't remember how it ended. Probably somebody dies. Anyway, and the other one, the story Kumo no Ito, it's a story about this guy, very bad dude, hasn't done a good thing in his life except once he saved a small spider. And so when he dies, he is of course sent down to Jigoku, the Buddhist inferno, and there he can expect to endure countless millennia of torture. However, the spider sends down a strand of web for him to rescue him, and if he takes hold of the web, he can climb out and escape. And so he tries to, and he does, start climbing up the spider's thread, but then all the other tortured souls and denizens of basically hell, inferno, also start climbing up the thread after him. And actually, you know what, you're gonna have to find out for yourself how the story ends. But anyway, so that's it for the 17th album, Mandoro. And the way I see it, this is a second debut. This is the band basically getting heavier. I think they'd been working up to it at this point. The last 3 albums, the heaviness was starting to come in more and more. Like before it was heavy, like heavy stoner rock or heavy doomish type rock metal. But it's starting to get like heavy metal heavy now, more so than before. And for me, this album is killer. In fact, the next 2 after this are also killer. So let's take a look at the next one. After Ningen Isu's appearance at Ozfest, the response was really good. Album sales were going up, there were obviously more fans interested in the band, and Wajima thought it's really good that they had decided to continue. Because throughout their career, there had been times where things did not look so great, right? Like their contract with Meldak expired, they became an indie band, or they lost a drummer, or they were back with a drummer, back with the label, but things were just you know, they weren't selling a lot. So there could have been many times in the career they could have just thought, well, maybe we should pack it up. But they didn't. They just kept going album after album. That brings us up to album number 18, Burai Hojo. Now, this is an interesting album title. The Burai part actually means self-reliant or independent. And certainly because the band had been existing for so long and basically with their own management now in the last several years and looking after themselves, they were self-reliant and independent. And with things looking up after Ozfest, I guess that gave them more reliance, but self-reliance. But another thing is that the Webleo definition of Burai also gives the meaning of like something like knavish or rascally or even gangster, and maybe that is captured in the tough guy look of the faces here on the cover. That's it for Burai. And I guess also like the pursuit of rock and roll as a career is also not often looked so favorably upon by the public, so that might also give this kind of tough look here some meaning. Then the other part, the Hojo part, actually means fertility or productivity. So there's this meaning of being self-reliant and also very productive, captured in the title. Then also, Wajima was thinking they had adopted a Japanese style of dress from around the time shortly before Nakajima joined the band. So he wanted to have that image of them in traditional Japanese wear on the cover and asked for the artist to create a kind of woodblock print, traditional style of Japanese artwork here. And this was actually one of the 2 first albums I ever bought by them back in September of 2019. This one and their second album, Sakura no Mori no Mankai no Shita. Anyway, so for this album here, already from the previous album Mandoro, they had been going for a more heavy metal sound. Wajima says any looseness that they may have had in creating songs in the past was basically all ironed out. They were a solid act right now, and going for the heavy metal sound. Wajima has talked previously in the book on the previous albums about chords and chord progressions or riffs, different types of chords and effects, and it sounds very much like something you would expect from a progressive rock act. However, for this album here, as well as with the previous one, they were going more for that heavy metal sound, and the basis of the heavy metal sound in the guitar chords is minor chords. So that's what they went for mostly here, was to keep that going. One of the signature songs that they created for this album is Namahage. And Wajime explains they wanted really to capture again that minor chord sound. And at the same time, he wanted to put in some Japanese influence. So some of the guitar playing is what he calls the Tsugaru Jamisen guitar, which I think is basically the picking style. He plays a Gibson SG most of the time, but if you observe in some of the videos, the way he holds the pick and picks the strings, that is not like a traditional Western rock guitar style of playing. And I believe that's what he's referring to with the Tsugaru Jamisen guitar. The Tsugaru Jamisen I mentioned in a previous video. It's a shamisen, it's a 3-stringed type of instrument, so, and I think he can play it. So I think it's that style he put into it. And the one reason why was, of course, it's cool, it gives a special sound, but also it's a style that is not immediately easy for Western guitarists to imitate. So it does have that distinctive Japanese flavor to it that would certainly catch attention, and has. Then also the regarding the concept of self-reliance, independence, or liberty, here they went for the reverse take. This song, Namahage, has the cry of the slave vocal in it, and as well, he says that there's something reflected in the lyrics in Buddhist teachings. One of the lyrics is something like, the burden of our sins weigh heavier than the mountain, and because our sins have such burden, we can never truly be free. In fact, in Buddhist teachings, of course, you cannot truly be free until you reach Nirvana. And that concept is kind of brought up in track number 6, Shitsubusho, I guess. It's, I tried to look up the meaning of the individual words. It was very difficult. But the translation on the Wikipedia page for this album calls it Universal Buddhist Nature. So I guess that's the closest thing we're going to go with. Now, one interesting thing about that song is Nakajima actually borrowed a special type of Chinese wooden gong for near the end of the song. There's an electric sitar, and as well in the percussion there's this Chinese wooden gong. Nakajima borrowed it from a friend, or an acquaintance anyway, who worked at a temple. And I guess there was some kind of thought about, is it okay to be using this to performing like a rock band recording? And I think that the person responded, well, if you take really good care of it, then it's fine to use. And I know that this is one of the Buddhist teachings, that you should take care of the things that you use in your daily life. Always take care to use them well. But another interesting thing is that Wajima added, well, we only needed to use it for the songs with Buddhist type lyrics, so maybe it's agreeable to use that instrument for those songs anyway. Certainly not the ones about Jigoku. Now, another interesting thing on this album here, Suzuki's recently, on all the recent albums, most of them anyway, Kenichi Suzuki has actually been writing the lyrics and music, or music and lyrics I should stress, for only one song. And in the past he usually wrote 2, 3, even 4 of the songs, but recently it's been only for one song, and then he writes the music usually for about 4 or sometimes 5 of them. I think typically 4 anyway. But anyway, the song that he wrote lyrics and music for is this Jigoku no Ryōrinin, which is basically the cook of hell, or Wikipedia page calls it the hellish cook. Anyway, that song, the engineer, the guy who did the engineering for that song, obviously, anyway, he entered a national Japanese music production contest, and that song won the silver prize for the engineering on the recording of that. So that's pretty cool. However, Suzuki also said that he came up with a lot of riffs for this during the writing process for this album, and he ended up scrapping a lot of them. And he said it's because Wajima had basically raised the bar for songwriting and riff writing for Ningen Isu. To which, again, Wajima says, what are you talking about? There you go again, saying that I'm writing stuff so well. And of course, your music writing is a big part of Ningen Isu. It's part of the important balance to the band. And, you know, I think it doesn't matter whether Suzuki actually writes the lyrics or not. I'm pretty sure he comes up with the concept. He has the concept and the music, and I think he probably just tells Wajima, this is my idea for the song, and then Wajima tries to write the lyrics. But, you know, what you have is Shinji Wajima's songs. Sometimes there are some love songs, but he also writes a lot of songs from this kind of Buddhist teaching angle, or from a literary angle, or even philosopher's angle sometimes. And then you have Kenichi Suzuki, whose songs are usually more visceral, like something about hell, or like Jigoku, or Oni, or rock band, or a little bit horror themed, you know. And that makes Ningen Isu's music really interesting, because you have this duality. So, you know, just today I was discussing with somebody on Twitter about Kenichi Suzuki. I think she said, if I ever have the chance to meet him, I want to tell him, we really need your songs, because you're awesome. Anyway, do I have anything else to say about this one here? The music of Uchusen Mirokugo, which is track number 7. Actually, that Nakajima, the drummer, actually came up with the music for that. And he doesn't play guitar, as I understand, but anyway, he explained how he wanted the riff to be, and it got the green light, and he was really excited about that. He was really glad that Wajima and Suzuki agreed to include his song for the album here. Of course, Wajima wrote the lyrics, but anyway. And during their recent trip to Europe, where they performed 2 shows in Germany and 1 in London, they performed that song, and Nakajima got to sing the lead vocal for that. So I think that's pretty cool for him. Okay, I guess that's about it for that one, is it? Yeah, I keep checking my notes on the computer over here. So let's move on to the next album. So it was at this point here that Ningen Isu reached their 25th anniversary and released another double compilation album. This is their 4th compilation, their 2nd double compilation. And for this album here, they recorded 4 new tracks. And one of them, Uchu Kara no Iro, the color from out of space, based on an H.P. Lovecraft, I have H.P. Lovecraft hiding back here somewhere, based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. Wajima says that song basically completes one of the styles, anyway, of Ningen Isu's music. And that song was made into a video. And I've seen quite a few reaction videos to that video and to that song. And everybody really enjoys it. Of course, it's mostly pretty much all men, older than me, by a few years anyway, it looks like. But yeah, most of them anyway, they all really dig that song, which is really cool. Okay, but we are going to move on to the 19th studio album. This one here, Kaidan Soshite Shi to Eros. Kaidan meaning ghost stories, Shi, death, or what do they call it here on Wikipedia? Thanatos and Eros, giving it that nice Greek feel to it. So let's see here. So this was, it was coming up before their next appearance at Ozfest. They were starting to prepare the ideas for this album. And of course they actually performed at Ozfest. Coming up to this though, Wajima was thinking that because this was once again an opportunity for them to expand their audience, he wanted the next album to really say what Ningen Isu was about. He said probably a lot of people had heard the name Ningen Isu but weren't really familiar with the band as such, or people would think, well, they're kind of a horror band, aren't they? And the previous album, Burai Hojo, the title didn't really give any indication of that. So he just decided to go straight out and choose Kaidan ghost stories as the main theme, and then Shi to Eros covering death and, well, Eros, basically love, isn't it? And in an interview I read with him on in the Japan Times, actually, I found it on the internet, he said that, of course, because they were approaching 50 by this time, they were thinking about death and love probably more. But anyway, the concept of the Kaidan, the ghost stories, it's a pretty broad concept. They could include many different things in that. And so, for example, when Kenichi Suzuki came up with the idea of the earless character of Hoichi, for Hoichi Junan, that was a theme that could fit right in there. And another thing that Wajima was thinking about was Georges Bataille, a French author. He wrote a book called Madame Edwarda, and that theme there seemed to fit in really good as well. One of the things that Wajima was thinking was that they wanted to create an album that could fit in with the subculture, and being a part of Ozfest was a kind of subculture festival. He wanted something that rock fans could really get into. If things get too wordy or too complex, some degree of rock fans don't really stick around for that, so he wanted something that, even if it was a bit wordy, the image could still capture someone's attention. And also, I remember in this Japan Times article, Wajima was also saying that he was thinking, during Ozfest, he noticed a lot of the Western bands, they would have, the music would be a little bit simpler for the chorus with more punch to it. So he decided if the music was going to be complex during the verses, he would go for something a little bit more simple and punchy for the chorus, just to help make the song that much more memorable. So you've got this album here with all sorts of types of horror ghost story things, as well as this musical concept that they're going to stick with the heavy metal theme and they're going to give it a little bit more punch to it, but still keep that kind of Ningen Isu progressive element as well. Now, one of the songs that Wajima talks about in the book is the opening track, Kyofu no Daio. He said that this song, he had basically the kind of image of Darth Vader, because, you know, Darth Vader's cool, right? Everybody likes Darth Vader, even though he's the bad guy. And he wanted to write a song like that. However, The original song that he worked on was called... Let me see, what was it called? It was called Aku no Teigoku, which basically you would translate as the Evil Empire. Okay, and so what he decided to do was try to imagine, get in his mind the role of the bad guy, the villain, and then try to write a song based out of that. And he found that as he thought about it and wrote the lyrics, in a way he almost felt he was kind of, you know, becoming the bad guy embodied, so to speak. And he found after a while that the lyrics started to get really dark and uncomfortable. And even the other band members, Suzuki and Nakajima, they said, these lyrics are really terrible. Like, what's happening in the lyrics are really terrible. And Wajima started to feel so bad while writing the lyrics, so uncomfortable with them, he stopped and he just put the song down and left it for a few days. And when he came back to it again, he decided to change it and then came up with this one here, this Kyofu no Daio, and completely rewrote the song. And he said it had been actually quite a long time since he had to rewrite an entire song. However, Kenichi Suzuki points out that while the lyrics did have some pretty dark images in them, one of the terms he really liked was the planet of the serpent. Now he said, like, usually serpent is a detestable term. A lot of people don't like serpents or snakes. But when you call it the planet of the serpent, it gives a really kind of cool image. And certainly it seems to capture this image of evil. Because unfortunately, serpents are often connected to evil. I like snakes. Okay. All right. And then another thing Suzuki then mentions is that at that time, he said he really was coming up with a lot of great riffs. You know, and they would come up with riffs and then see how they could work them into songs. And around this time, Ningen Isu were working together with, Kinniku Shoujotai, another Japanese rock band. And they were doing a collaboration together, a song called Jigoku Aloha. And at this time, Wajima was looking for some good riff to use for the song, and Suzuki had this really great one. And he said to Wajima, please don't use that one, okay? And so he didn't. And that riff that Suzuki really wanted to keep, he used for Hoichi Junan, near the middle part of the song there. So he said if Wajima had decided to use that riff for Jigoku Aloha, then Hoichi Junan probably wouldn't have turned out the same way. And as for me, it's one of my favorite songs of theirs recently. I love that song. Okay, let's see, anything else? Yeah, one more thing to say. The band's popularity after this album increased even more. And we previously mentioned about how Shinji Wajima was able to, how he decided to just quit his job and concentrate full-time on Ningen Isu. Well, at this point here, Suzuki was finally able to quit his job after 23 years and devote his time fully to writing music for Ningen Isu. So that's pretty cool. Oh, one more thing I want to mention. The cover photo was taken at a location near Urayama Dam in Chichibu, an area in Saitama Prefecture, which is where I live. And I have actually visited Urayama Dam, well, near the dam, a few times because there is a small limestone cave there, which I've been to with friends before. So I thought it was really cool to know that this photograph of Ningen Isu was actually taken near a location that I've been to a few times. So maybe I should go there and see if I can find this spot. Okay everybody, I see that this video is getting to be around the upper limits of the length of my videos. So I know we have 2 more albums to do. We're going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about them in the next video, alright? So I thank you for watching this far. I hope the information is useful to you. As always, I'm getting this from these books in Japanese. My Japanese is not perfect. If I have made any small mistakes or misunderstandings, I apologize. But yeah, we'll do the last 2 albums in another video. And I do have some other closing remarks or some final remarks to say. So let's not make this video too long. Alright, there's also one other thing. All this information I'm presenting, I've been typing it out on the computer and I keep looking at it all the time, right? Checking my notes. I've decided to put all that onto I'm going to make a WordPress blog site anyway, but I'm just going to enter in all that information as individual blog entries for each album. So song listings, times, who wrote what, translations, meanings, inspirations, background story, all that. I'm going to put an entry in for each album. It's going to take me a while, but in the next video I will have that started, and I'll tell you what the website address is, the URL, so that you can check it out if you need to. Okay, thank you for watching this far. I hope the information's been useful, if I didn't say that already. And stay away from the coronavirus, and if you do get it, well then just stay home and watch lots of YouTube videos about Ningen Isu or Ningen Isu videos, okay? Alright, anyway, catch you in the next video.